Hi, everyone, and welcome to SEO Up Close. Today, I'm super excited to have Jacob Andra. He's the founder of CustomerFaucet.com, a Utah-based agency focused on search engine optimization for small to mid-sized brands. And today, we're going to talk with Jacob about how SEO and content marketing overlap. So, hi, Jacob. Welcome.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So, what do you think is the current state of content for many brands? Like, what are brands doing right, or what are brands doing wrong in terms of content?
Yeah, well, I see a lot of brands erring in two extremes, and so I'll describe the two extremes. And of course, I think that the middle ground is the way to go. So, on one extreme, you see brands creating a lot of content that's very engaging to read, but it's not really based on user search intent, or it's not very optimized for search. And so if you throw that content into a tool like Ahrefs, you can see that they're not really getting organic traffic, and they're not really ranking for any keywords. And so that's unfortunate, because if it was just written more with keywords in mind, they could be getting a lot of traffic for the effort they're putting into their content. And then on the other extreme, you see some brands double down on SEO content. And they say, okay, we're going to write, based on search terms, user intent. We're going to target these high volume search terms. We're going to make sure that it's, all the writing, the content is optimized, and then it just reads like a keyword salad. They may hire cheap writers and just tell them, hey, look at the top search results, write this to compete with them. And it kind of is copycat content. It doesn't come out sounding original. It's not engaging. Nobody wants to read it. And it certainly doesn't add anything new to the conversation. So those are the two extremes. And of course, the one I advocate, what I push brands to do is do both, right? Write engaging content that is also optimized for search.
How would you recommend approaching content and creating content calendar and content marketing in general?
Sure. Of course, it is going to depend on niche and sector. So, like one caveat or one exception would be if you are in a niche that is very new and you are sort of creating a category, you're creating a demand that maybe is not there. You can't rely as much on keyword search volume, because that's a lagging indicator. But certainly in a very established category, established industry, looking at what people are already searching for it's a no-brainer. It's obviously where you want to start. So if you're going to write content, you should look at, in your industry, what are they searching for? And if there are search terms getting thousands of searches every month, why wouldn't you want to try to target your content or orient it around them? So a little bit reverse engineering. And there's a little bit of hubris to a brand that thinks, okay, I'm just going to sort of express my brand personality to the world, and people will want to come read it, because people don't. I mean, if you're not writing to what they're already wanting to know, then they're not going to come read it. So you have to a little bit cater to what the trends are and what people want to consume and what their questions are. And all of that is readily available. Google, people also ask. Tools like Ahrefs or SEMrush can show you all of that information.
Yeah. But do you sort of find a way to prioritize the content, or look at the funnel stage, or is there a way to, which topic to choose to write about first or to recommend first?
Yeah, exactly. And that's obviously important. So again, it totally depends on industry, niche, how established your site already is. I mean, if you're a brand new site in a competitive niche, you're going to want to pick the very long tail stuff and start there and gradually work your way up. So even if a search term only has, 20 searches a month, but the competition is lower and you can start to show up for that on page one, that's a win. And you can start doing more and more of those. And of course, if you're more established and your site is stronger, and again, depending on what your competitors are doing, then obviously you can target the higher volume stuff. So it is so situationally dependent. But I guess the universal is that you want a careful analysis of what keywords are getting what search volume, and what your competition is, and what they're writing about and what they're doing. And based on all of that, you can develop a customized strategy and of course, then you have to test and iterate like, okay, based on my research, I think we have a decent chance of ranking for this term. And you also want to look for content gaps. For instance, if you see that a certain search query, maybe how to, or some type of people also ask search query is getting a decent amount of search volume and none of your competitors are covering it adequately, then of course that is an obvious place to start. So you look for those gaps where other people aren't covering the content well enough, and then you go for that. If you can find that, that's an easier win.
Yep. And what are your thoughts on people objecting to SEO-driven content?
Yeah, and absolutely. And that's also, the other extreme we talked about, where you just double down on SEO content and it just reads like a keyword salad. It's dry and boring. And the people who object to that are absolutely right. Like, that is a terrible way to do SEO. And so, of course, I'm advocating for a data-driven, keyword research-driven content approach, but you still have to inject personality and interest to it. And so it has to read engaging. Your brand should have a personality and a tone, and you should add something new and original to the conversation. And again, this is so situationally dependent. Like if you're a SaaS company or medical device company, you're in some technical field, then you're going to have subject matter expertise, and you're going to have to inject that subject matter expertise. Hopefully some original data from your own research or your own, engineering team, whatever it is, right? The more of that you can bring, the better. So it's not just copycat content, because the people who criticize SEO-driven content are absolutely right in their criticisms, but they are wrong. The conclusion that we should not do SEO-driven content is wrong, but their criticisms of it are absolutely valid.
So you mean there are things we need to take into consideration, but in the same time, we still need to base a part of our data on SEO, tools and keyword research and that sort of, is that, did I get it correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, with the exception being if you're in a nascent industry that's just emerging and there isn't that research available, it's very sparse, then of course you have to look ahead to sort of project what you think the interest is going to be or what the terms are going to be. But in any well-developed industry where that research is readily available, why wouldn't you base it on what people already want to know? Why would you talk about something where there's no evidence that anyone is interested in knowing about it? Now, another exception, again, there are always exceptions, is if a brand has a very heavy, very fanatical social media following, you can write about whatever you want, share it on your social channels, and people will eat it up because you've built that. Now, not every brand is in that position. And so, if you're in that position, you're going to get traffic and readership regardless of whether the content ranks on Google or not. So that's a kind of privileged position to be. But if you're publishing, hoping for organic readers to stumble across you, they're just not going to do it unless you sort of reverse engineer it around the topics people are already curious about and the keywords that Google associates. So Google has this map, and you know this obviously, about topical relevancy and NLP and how this topic relates to that and all these topical clusters. And if you don't build those sort of into your article and include the right keywords that signal to Google that this article is about these various topics and their clusters, then you won't have much chance of showing up in search results. So you definitely have to do that. But again, if that's all you're doing, it's going to be very dry and boring, and you don't want that either.
So one thing comes to my mind when talking about content and content creation and all of this, how would you communicate this to the copywriter?
Yeah, so the writer, exactly. So you have to have content briefs and develop them and basically tell the writer exactly what you're expecting. Everybody does content briefs differently. But one thing is, you should have a well-developed brand personality. And if you don't, it's going to be harder for the writer to come up with anything original. And so one part of a content brief should be, look at the competitors who are already ranking on page 1 for these search queries and see what they're doing right. But then, from there, don't just copy them exactly and create bland copycat content, because Google is now coming out, or they have come out a while ago with their net what is it, net information gain? No, it's not net. Remember what it's called? Something about, does your content bring something new that other top page one content does not already address? And so they're actually toying with that. And I think as they tune their algorithms, that's going to become more and more weighted. And they're going to be looking. So again, if you're in a technical industry, part of bringing something new would be, okay, look at what the other articles are doing right, but then interview the experts within our company and create, data points or quotes, quote the experts within our own company. So you're actually bringing new content that no other article is going to have. And if it's not a technical industry, you try to bring some brand personality. Again, if the brand has a distinctive tone, whether that's irreverent or funny or snarky, depending on the industry, this could be more or less relevant. But whether it's by injecting brand personality, original data, or quotes from your own experts, you've just got to start bringing something that other articles aren't going to have and write it in an engaging way. And so depending on the industry, there's different ways to communicate that to the copywriter. But it's hard to do if you're trying to skimp and pay very cheap writers, low cost writers. They're going to have a harder time picking up on the nuances. So again, it's situationally dependent though, right?
Yeah, definitely. There is a trend right now. Obviously, there's a lot of people doing SEO, and there's never been a better time for SEO than now. And definitely, there's also demand for copywriters, and people are trying to, find cost-effective ways and thinking if they can cut down on the budget for copywriting, that's a good idea, but it's not always a good idea, and it can reflect negatively on the brand and the quality of the content and how you position your brand, and a lot of elements. So a lot of brands struggle with the budget they allocate to copywriters. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and again, there's not one exact answer, because I know SEOs that are very successful at achieving a very high publishing velocity, and they focus more on quality over quantity, and they do so successfully, and that works for them. And then I know others that are focused much more on quality over quantity, and obviously there's some kind of balance. You've got to achieve the right balance, and it's going to vary based on your industry, your brand personality, what your tolerance is. So it's really hard to answer, but everyone is obviously trying to cut costs and find the cheapest solution for content. There are now all of these AI tools on the market, and some brands are going all in on those, and those produce, in my opinion, I've yet to see anything impressive with those, but they can certainly churn out an incredible amount of content very quickly and at almost zero cost. And so that's a whole new game, but I've yet to see anything that convinces me that they can actually compete with a decent copywriter. They are essentially regurgitating what's already ranking, and the content is quite terrible. It might be able to fool algorithms, it might be able to rank, and it does rank, but for a human reader looking to consume content, it is not cutting it yet. But I don't know, so it's hard to say. You were about to ask something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's very hard to imagine AI at this stage and at the time we are right now able to add something new, right? Like it's sourcing this from somewhere else, which is online as well, and just rewriting it in different ways. And so it's just, it lacks human touch. It lacks genuine, human thoughts. It's just a very machine robotic way of sort of listing what's there in different ways. So I agree with you on that.
I've actually done experiments before where I've experimented with AI tools. And I do use AI tools not for writing content, but for guiding me as a writing aid to suggest what keywords other content is using. And so I can try to work those keywords in a very organic way, because I believe that is important. You want to send those relevancy signals to Google, but if that's all you're doing, it's going to be very bad content. But I was getting back to this experiment I did before, where it was content I had written myself, and I was using AI tools to guide the writing. And then what I would see later, a couple of months later, as I was writing a similar article on a similar topic, the tool would actually be pulling from my earlier article, which would be on page 1. So it would create this feedback loop where the content I had created was now part of the inputs to other articles, and the keyword suggestions would be now changed, because now my article would be page 1 and I would use maybe different numbers of keywords or whatever. So now the tool is suggesting new suggestions in terms of keyword volume or something like that. And so it can create this feedback loop where if all you're doing is just catering to the algorithm, the algorithm doesn't actually know what it wants, right? Or the algorithms. And these tools that all they're doing is going out and analyzing what's currently ranking. That's only part of the picture. You have to take much more into account than that. Yeah, and it just creates this keyword echo chamber that feeds back on itself. And the content on page 1 informs the algorithms of what to write, and then they write more content, and it just creates this endless loop. And so then nothing new gets added, and Google's highly aware of this, and they don't want that. For Google's goal is to serve up the very best experience to their users, and their #1 product is search. And so they don't want users to just get this page 1 search results full of bland AI generated, it's all exactly the same carbon copy results. They don't want that, and that's why they're tuning their algorithm toward this. I believe they call it net information gain, but it's essentially which results are highly relevant but yet offer new content or something that the other results don't contain. And that's again where your own experts, a brand's own experts, or a brand's persona, your own data, your own surveys, or things like that can be highly original and can make the difference. One of my clients, the founder actually has a lot of relevant experience within the industry. And so one of the things we're doing is we are writing content targeted to keywords, and it's SEO driven content, but it's working in her own original stories and experience into the narrative. And so when people get it, they're getting very expert opinion, and it is kind of engineered toward ranking for certain search terms, but also because it has her original experiences and stories woven in, then no other search results are going to have that.
I definitely agree with you on this. For one reason, I've tried it personally in the past, creating a blog post for someone and putting this personal part, like your experience or even a personal experience of someone you have interviewed. Not only is it good for the reader in terms of being a unique content and so on, but also it's better for conversions. If you're an e-commerce website and you're talking about your personal experience with a product, not necessarily a brand, like a specific brand, like a type of products, and how it can be useful and what to avoid and that sort of stuff, and your personal as a person, your experience is there, it really matters a lot in terms of conversion. So I think this is a very good point. And I don't think AI at this stage and at this time in 2021 is able to have this. I mean, unless we have robots who experience with this stuff. So what would your main advice for people who work in digital marketing and in SEO in terms of content marketing? What is the one thing or the few things that you think they should always keep on their mind?
Yeah, just as we started out talking, just try to balance the two extremes, where on the one extreme, you have totally original content, but it's not engineered or researched based on any user intent or search volume. And on the other hand, you have dry SEO content. Try to find the balance between those two, where it is based on research and it is targeting search intent, but it also is original. So just try to always look for, the middle ground or the intersection between those two, and try to make every piece of content be valuable in SEO terms. Obviously, there are exceptions. If you're writing about a blog post about our company has a new CEO, right? You're not going to necessarily be trying to rank for any specific keyword. That's just an announcement. So there are exceptions, but in general, for most content pieces you're producing, make it do double duty and, engage with the readers while capturing search volume, while targeting keywords that you want to be found for.
Today was really interesting. I personally have learned a few things, and I'm really happy that we had this chat today. Thank you, Jacob, and I'll be posting this on LinkedIn and YouTube. Thank you for coming
Awesome.
today.
Thanks, Sarah.
YouTube. Bye.
Bye.